Okay, guys, so yesterday we had that great map activity that gives you a really good background of foreign policy since World War II and just how kind of the domino theory worked and the fear of the spread of communism. So today is what were some of these events that happened right after World War II. And of course, the big deal was the atomic bomb. We are the only nation with the atomic bomb at this point in time, up until 1949. And that is going to make us the superpower. And as the superpower, we are going to be flexing some muscles here. So we're going to be testing the nuclear bombs that we had are going to be made bigger and better. I guess you could say just bigger and more powerful. The hydrogen bomb is going to be developed, and we are going to be doing testing. So we're going to have a couple of tests on land, and then we're going to, as the nuclear capability gets bigger and bigger, we find these very small islands in the Pacific, and we're going to move the population, and we will test on these islands. One of them was the Bikini Islands, and the bikini bathing suit, of course, coming from there. But as you can see, these are really quite beautiful. These pictures are taken from miles and miles and miles away, the famous mushroom cloud. And when we're doing this, we really, once again, it's testing. And we know that it's nuclear material, but we don't realize that this is going up into the atmosphere. It's getting into clouds. You've probably heard of acid rain. As it moves across the world, and ultimately we are going to ban testing above ground, and we're going to move to testing underground, basically under the ocean. This is an example of a hydrogen bomb from miles and miles and miles away. It said it boiled the water. It creates tsunami type waves. Just the power on these things is incredible. And this is going to result, of course, in a nuclear arms race. When Russia gets the bomb, now we're making more and more. We're making missile delivery systems. We're putting systems in and developing ideas on, okay, if this target gets hit, where are we going to hit, and back and forth. And this is going to go on throughout the Cold War, this nuclear arms race. Some artists actually see figures in these nuclear clouds. Some see evil, and there's actually a type of art that's made from these photographs. So how long does the Cold War last? Technically, from right after World War II, 1945, through 1991, and that's when the Berlin Wall will come down. And although, those are arbitrary dates, we're looking at a very, very long period of time, over 40 years. Well, yeah, over 40 years. So what is a Cold War exactly? The two major powers that are in the Cold War are not fighting, okay, but there's things going on in the periphery, and there is a constant state of tension where you're worried about making the other person mad and an imminent nuclear attack. So what could possibly help this? Remember, we'd had the League of Nations that we had not been a member of. Well, after World War II, we do become members of the United Nations. Now, the United Nations was one of the things they talked about at Yalta, and they are going to form the United Nations. The United Nations is going to be headed by the Security Council. And the Security Council has these 5 permanent members: the United States, Great Britain, France, Russia or the USSR, and China. And these are permanent members. And then they're going to have other nations that will serve on the Security Council, but they will rotate in and out. These nations have veto power. So you can see possibly there might be some problems here. Because what does the Soviet Union want? Remember, the Soviet Union had been invaded now, World War I and World War II. They lost millions of people, both military and civilians, and they didn't want that to happen again. And we talked about that yesterday with the MAP activity. So basically they're saying, we fought hard, we lost a lot of people, and now we're going to kind of keep these countries that we have invaded on our way into Germany. So we need these for strategic control. This is a picture we looked at the Yalta Conference with Churchill, Stalin, and of course FDR there in the middle. And we commented on how FDR looked like he was getting old, that he was sickly looking. And shortly after Yalta, Franklin Roosevelt will die. So the deal he made at Yalta, remember, they talked about forming a UN, which will happen. They talked about what's going to happen to Poland. And remember, they kind of made an agreement on self-determination, that these countries would be able to decide what they wanted to be, a monarchy, a democracy, so forth. And Stalin kind of gives lip service to this, but he is going to lie. He is not going to allow this. They also talked about what to do with Germany at the end of the war. You've got the UN here, and this is a really good political cartoon. I'm going to let you look at this, and I want your idea on what you think this political cartoon means. If you said, this nation, you got the black cloud up above, you've got the world split in two, and you've got the United Nations trying to keep things together. So as we looked at yesterday, you can see this is how Germany is going to be divided right after World War II. You've got the Russian area there on the east, large area for the United States, France with the Alsace-Lorraine, that area that they've fought over for many, many years, and then Great Britain's area there on the northwest. At this point in time, the USSR, Russia, has taken over all of these Eastern European countries on their way into Germany. And as you can see, they border the western border of Russia, and they're not going to let those go. They want that as a buffer. And they are going to keep control of these nations. So these nations that you see there on the Eastern European nations are going to be called satellite nations. And a satellite nation, this is something you need to know, define, is a nation controlled by the USSR. Winston Churchill comes to America, and he goes to Missouri. That is Truman's home state. And when he's in Missouri, he makes a famous speech. And in the famous speech, he says, "An iron curtain has descended over Europe." And basically what he's saying, this iron curtain that has descended, everything on one side is communist, everything on the other side is not. And that the Soviet Union was not going to let this curtain be lifted. Remember we talked about before the war started, Chiang Kai-shek and Mao Zedong had been fighting over who should be the leader of China. The fight will continue. They joined together, of course, to fight Japan, but now the fight is going to continue after World War II. Chiang Kai-shek is supported by the United States. He's not that great a guy, but we're going to support him because Mao Zedong is a communist. And anything that is communist, the United States at this point in time is not going to support. So Mao Zedong is going to be fighting against Chiang Kai-shek for control and leadership of China. Now Mao is going to be supported by not just the Soviet Union, but he's supported by the people of China as well. And ultimately, Mao is going to win this clash. So here's Chiang Kai-shek. Chiang Kai-shek is going to be forced out of China, and he's going to set up his own government in Formosa. And we're going to recognize him as the true leader of China. Mao Zedong is going to take leadership of the vast territory that is China, and he will be the leader for a very long period of time. So this is happening in 1949. This is really going to shake things up. The domino theory, put a little star by this, circle this. The domino theory is this: if one nation falls to communism, another will follow, and another will follow, and another will follow, just like dominoes fall. So the domino theory is we've got to stop this from happening, because if one nation becomes communist, then another will come, and another will come, and another will come. If you look here with the red flags, you can see this is, and we did this yesterday, but this is a map showing the Soviet control of those nations on its western border. And that does give them kind of this buffer. Nobody can get through to invade into the Soviet Union as long as they have control of these countries. And Stalin is not going to give up control. Harry Truman did not trust Stalin. He didn't like Stalin. He hated communism. And he is going to read a telegram that's going to come in from the ambassador that we had to Russia. And it's called the Long Telegram. And the Long Telegram says that the goal of the Soviet Union is to expand, 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 and to ultimately make the world communist. Truman said, nope, we are going to start a policy, and our policy is going to be containment. Containment is stopping the spread of communism and doing anything in the United States' power to stop this from happening, to contain the spread. So don't write anything now in your notes, but this is the language of Truman's doctrine. It must be the policy of the United States to support free peoples who are resisting attempted subjugation by armed minorities or by outside pressures. So what is Truman saying here? Truman is saying the United States will do whatever is necessary to help another nation fight against communist takeover. So this is his policy of containment. And When he says this, whatever is necessary, he just means that. It could be military, it could be financial aid, it could be it could be providing weapons, advice, whatever it takes. George Marshall, and if you recall again, in World War II, he was a major general in World War II. Then he was an advisor to Franklin Delano Roosevelt and then to Truman, and then he's going to become the Secretary of State. And he had traveled throughout Europe, and he basically is going to go to Truman and go to Congress and say, if we do not help rebuild Europe, Europe has been bombed. People, remember, there are 12 million people wandering around with no place to go, no shelters, no jobs. He said, if we don't do something, we're going to go into another worldwide depression. We have to reach out and we have to help. And so he comes up with a plan, and he is going to get the Nobel Peace Prize for this plan. And the United States is going to step up and help rebuild Europe after World War II. So here's his plan. Humanitarian aid in the form of food and clothing and shelter. Money to help these countries rebuild their infrastructure. And trade. So whatever it takes, we're going to help provide it, and we are going to rebuild Europe so we can have trading partners in the future and avoid the depression that we looked at after World War I. So this is showing boatloads going to all these different countries with all sorts of aid. We took tractors and seed, and we took fishing equipment for the Netherlands and for Sweden and for Norway. We took auto building parts for Italy. We took whatever people asked for. Basically, it wasn't just money, it was stuff, it was building materials, and we sent people, experts over there to help build electrical plants and dams and just rebuild Europe after the devastation that was World War II. This shows Hamburg, Germany in 1945, and then in just 5 years after the rebuild with the Marshall Plan, you can see it's a bustling city, and there's still some work to be done here, but you've got the buildings rebuilt, you've got the roads, and you have got a new economy. After World War II, we are going to create 3 more agencies under the National Security Act. And the Department of Defense, that is the Pentagon. So instead of going to 4 different branches of the service, the Air Force is going to be created at this point. We can go to 1 building. We're going to have the chiefs of staff that will represent the Marines and the Air Force and the Army and the Navy, that will all be available for this national security team. Then the National Security Council, every day our president gets a briefing from the National Security Advisor, and it's put together by this council, and basically these are the hot spots of the world, these are the things we need to be looking at, these are threats, even these are good things. And then of course the CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. We had some spy activity, but not a agency. And this is going to be funded. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars is going to be poured into the Central Intelligence Agency. And there were really spies after World War II and in the 1950s and 60s. And the 007 stuff, a lot of that is based on real worries and real type spies. So how the problem is, the CIA is not going to have much oversight during this time period, and they are going to do some things that we'll talk about that might be considered questionable. So let's get back to Germany. If you remember that map, France, England, and the United States are going to merge their zones. And so we're going to end up with West Germany, and they're going to call it the Federal Republic of Germany. And it's going to be set up as a democratic Germany. Stalin was angry about this, and he saw this kind of as a threat to him. And so, remember, Berlin is right in the middle of the Soviet-controlled area, and he puts a blockade around Berlin. And what he wanted to do, again, they're flexing their muscles to see how far they can go. He wanted us to give up and say, well, there's no way we can keep this going. Truman is not going to back down, and Truman and the United States and our partners in Europe are going to organize a massive airlift of supplies. Think about what 2 million people need on a daily basis. But for 11 months, we are going to bring in the necessities of life, generators. We're going to bring in diapers and flour and sugar and butter and formula and toothpaste and toilet paper. I mean, just everything that people need to survive for 11 months is going to be brought to them by air, 2 million people. Truman's going to call this Operation Victuals, and in the South, victuals are food, and he said, we are not going to back down, and he didn't. They're going to organize this, and it's kind of a miracle the way Berlin is saved. So they said that a plane was landing like every 10 minutes. You had a plane coming in, a plane taking off. Shiploads of material would be brought in, loaded on the planes, and flown in to Berlin. So just think of all the people needed to unload these planes, get all these supplies to the various people that needed things. The people of Berlin were very, very appreciative, and children in the United States actually donated candy, and the pilots, as they were flying into Berlin, would throw candy out to the children in Berlin. This is showing a little girl. I don't know why she doesn't have shoes on, but she's very appreciative and giving flowers to one of the airlift pilots. So for 11 months, and you can see there's the children waiting as they're coming over, and they're throwing candy to the children. The picture up here, the shipment contains the 5 millionth pound of supplies brought in to Berlin. And you can see them lined up here getting ready to take off and to land. The blockade ends. Stalin gives up. He lifts the blockade, and the airlift wins. So this was a major win for the United States. In 1949, we're going to form an organization which is still in existence today called NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And this is going to be an organization of 12 nations to start out with. And we have many, many more now. This is basically a treaty is I got your back. So this is a treaty organization, and our days of isolation are long gone. But because of this organization, Russia gets a little bit upset, and they're going to form their own organization. So in response to NATO, Russia is going to form what they call the Warsaw Pact. And those are all those satellite nations, those Eastern European nations that are going to have a military alliance, of course, kind of a forced alliance with Russia. So in response to NATO, the Warsaw Pact is formed. Okay, we'll talk about a little bit more about that tomorrow.